All right. Good morning. Welcome to another Saturday meeting of ADOSKC, Kansas City. We are me, Kiera, Layton, Miss Al, and Brian joining us right now. Today we're going to be talking about our thoughts on post-election results in Missouri, um, COVID-19, since we are currently in the midst of uncontrolled positivity rates and spreading, and also reparations. Um, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Please like this video. And of course, as always, please share this with your family and friends. So, you, excuse me. So, you are about to jump into a conversation that we started before I hit record. We were talking about reparations, specifically who reparations um, should be for, as far as some other organizations which are also pushing reparations, and why ADOS needs to continue pushing for an ADOS specific reparations agenda. So, all right. So, if you didn't catch it earlier this week, Senator or Congresswoman Jackson Lee was on YouTube sharing her thoughts on reparations, and I will link to that video. And in it, she was talking about um, some of the measures that should be included in the bill as far as HR 40 is concerned. And if you check out the comments on that video, you'll see that there was a lot of pushback from ADOS in the comments. So that's where we are right now. So let's talk about that.
Where were we? I guess to kind of sum up I know my perspective. I don't speak on nobody else's. Um, like we were saying, I think, having the word reparations in Congresswomen's mouth is definitely a plus. These women came together on this video, and I thought it was a great discussion. Like I was telling everybody earlier, I do feel that the conversations that are being had in mainstream America right now, what I like to do is look at where the conversation starts, and then I kind of predict where they're gonna go. Because a lot of the things that I see, they're talking the same talking points that we've been speaking about over the years. And once you have certain talking points, it leads to further questions. I.e., Black America deserves reparations. Well, who's Black America? You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to ask yourself.
Right.
Because when you start issuing out these checks, you got to send them to the right people. And then, how do you prove you're Black in America? We can look at the census. But we know, basically, we have to rule out the Rachel Dolezals because they are people that move in those spaces. And in order to do that, now we have to go into history. We have to go into policy. We have to go into census records. We have to go into policy. And once you start to go in those things, I honestly feel like nobody has any idea the amount of research that we do. Like all of the books we read, all of the policy, all of the legislation, all of the conversations, the conversations we have. Even yesterday, I saw, and I actually posted this on the forum. Andrew Yang was on the Breakfast Club. His big part of his platform is the UBI, the Universal Basic Income.
Well,
And
hold on. Let's first let's two topics. Like first, Black American reparations, and then we'll get into like UBI.
yeah,
So Miss Al, did you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. I have a question. Which Jackson Lee video was it? Because I was trying to reference it. Which video was it from? A town hall or something she had a couple days ago?
It was. Hold on. I
Yeah,
think
because I
that's
was
what it is.
trying to pull it up
Our
and
YouTube
I missed it. I'm
or Twitter
sorry.
chat. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it.
Thank you.
think I deleted it.
Sorry about that, you guys.
No, you're fine.
Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Find it in the history because
Yeah, it was.
I know
It
sometimes when they
featured.
run
The
yeah,
title was "Where Do We Go From Here?
Okay.
Reparations, Racial Healing, and Transformation," with Sheila Jackson Lee, Shirley Weber, and Barbara Lee. Hold on, let me get the video
conversation.
to it in the chat. Actually, I'll just.
Thank you, Kiara.
Hold on. Trying to see if I can get the link. Okay. So it's actually from a post I saw from Quantum Blackness. So let me add it to the chat here.
You found it?
No. Okay, there we go. I'll type this out. And transformation. All right, and then I'll do a quick share screen so you can see what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
All right, so here it is. It's from Quantum Blackness 2.0, and it was just kind of a panel discussion they had about reparations, post-election, and as you can see, there is a link to the YouTube video that you can watch later. Okay. But the points that I picked up on was the fact that ADOS is so engaged in those chats. And, earlier this year, ADOS Houston led a huge campaign about editing HR 40, with the edits being recommended from William Darity. And that campaign pretty much went nowhere. It's kind of concerning when a Congress rep ignores their constituents in that way. So I just think we should really take note of the fact that there were so many of ADOS, pushing for those edits, and they didn't happen. And they should have.
So it was they didn't accept any of the edits because the last I heard, Ice Cube was supposed to sit down with Sheila Jackson Lee and discuss it, but I didn't hear anything.
Yeah, we don't. I mean, there's been some other correspondence. I think William Darity shared a post about how he was emailing Jackson Lee, and those emails didn't go anywhere. There's been a multitude of posts from ADOS Houston about how they've been trying to get in contact with Jackson Lee, and that hasn't gone anywhere. And then finally, you have Ice Cube kind of doing a post and Jackson Lee actually responding to him, but we don't know if the meeting that she was kind of suggesting could take place ever did. So we just don't know where HR 40 is right now as far as the ADO is concerned. But what we do know is that the edits that would have secured the bill in a way that ADOS needed were not made.
So do we just not support HR 40 at this point?
I would say
yes. No.
I say no, we don't. Yes, as in no, we don't support it.
Right.
I think I also think that in how much ADOS engaged with HR 40, with how we pushed our Congress reps to support that bill, we might also need to do a little bit of kind of a re-education about why HR 40 is a failed bill. And because essentially, if it passes today, it goes to descendants of enslaved Africans. You know, if you watch the YouTube video, which Leighton linked to in the chat, I mean, all throughout the video, that's who Jackson Lee referenced as who should receive reparations from that bill.
But that's not her. Never mind.
But I think, but you have to realize that that there is a difference between American descendants of slavery
Yes.
and descendants of enslaved Africans.
And that's been proven.
And I think in case anyone doesn't know, American descendants of slavery identify as such because our ties to Africa, whatever African country we came from, were cut off from us the moment we're forced onto American soil. You know, our ancestors have been on American soil as enslaved people for centuries. We have, most of us, I suspect all of us, do not know what African country we came from. We may have taken a DNA test to see, but that's not the same as being connected to whatever origin country the first generation of ancestors who were brought to America came from. You know, a DNA test does not build a true connection in the way that we could or should ever identify as descendants of enslaved Africans. Our ancestors were American. They became American. They were bred here for centuries as Americans. All right. Good morning, Chris.
Kiara, can I jump in with a question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
About this? So, of course, this reflects my ignorance on the topic, but what is the practical difference? I understand the nominal difference, but what's the practical difference with respect to any potential legislation? Is descendants of enslaved Africans more inclusive, like a broader scope?
Yes. The descendants of enslaved Africans also opens reparations to immigrants who possibly came from countries in Africa as asylum seekers. You know, while you can say yes, asylum seekers in America have experienced discrimination, it is not on the same scale as American descendants of slavery. They are extremely different justice claims, and they should be handled separately.
Gotcha. Thanks.
So I just wanted to add to that quick crash course. So when we think about the transatlantic slave trade, right? So we have a bunch of enslaved people off the coast of West Africa. They come down or they come across the Atlantic, and they basically spread out all through North and South America, from the Caribbean to America to Southern America, Central America, all up and through there. What we're saying is the group of Africans that were brought to America, to these shores, they built America. Therefore, all of the resources, all of the wealth, all of the riches that come with what's here, that's what they built off of their backs. While we're not taking away from the enslaved peoples in other places, what we're saying is, if you want reparations, you have to go to the country that enslaved you. Because when we talk about American descendants of slavery, slavery is an institution. It's an institution that was created by the United States government and that benefited from essentially murdering, raping, and oppressing our people for 400 years. So what we're saying is, we're coming to that to that organization saying, you need to fix us because you broke us. We are American. You enslaved us. You benefited. And over the course from slavery to present day to, November 14th, we've been raped, robbed, and murdered, and everybody here has benefited except us. And we can prove that. So what we're saying is now there has to be a wealth redistribution, because just like there was a wealth redistribution back then, we work, you got all of the profit. Now we need that back because we work for it. You distributed the wealth then, now we're asking to distribute it back. And the line that we draw between other denominations or, people of other ethnicities, this is our claim, because the bulk of everything that we're fighting for, when it happened, you weren't here. You just got here and you understand what's going on, but understand you chose to come over here. You came over here because this is a better life for you than where we were. And we know that it's a better life because they murdered and raped and robbed and killed us to get it. So now we're trying to fix that. You know what I'm saying? We're making America live up to the Constitution.
So if I could just ask one more question about that. It seems like it creates almost a de facto situation where a person would have to prove an unbroken lineage from an enslaved person.
What do you mean by unbroken?
Well, I'm trying to,
Like
as I'm
from,
asking this question,
like
I'm thinking about it, like basically
centuries and centuries of enslaved Black Americans as part of your lineage?
well, no, I mean, an unbroken lineage of citizens. I know that term's not right, but persons who lived in the United States at all times from enslavement until the present, as opposed to like a scenario where someone immigrates from Africa and they had a descendant of slavery. They had an enslaved descendant in America. And I'm thinking about it with respect to the two criteria in the book. The second, obviously the first one is you have to have a descendant who was enslaved in America. And then the second being you have to have identified as Black for at least 12 years prior to the start of a reparations program.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about a scenario where someone would have immigrated from Africa, say in 1980,
Mm-hmm.
and they've self-identified as Black
Mm-hmm.
on, public records for 40 plus years, but they can't trace their lineage. I mean, basically, like, there's a gap from their descendant who was enslaved in America to their existence in America because, their descendant is an uncle. And so their vertical lineage goes to their parents who never were enslaved in the United States, but they do have an uncle who was enslaved in the United States. And so they immigrated, obviously not an uncle, but like, like a great uncle or something to that effect. So they come to the,
well, I think,
yeah.
So
So
what
happens to that person?
Well, okay, so in From Here to Equality, the criteria starts at 1776. So if you can, and it goes from 1776 to 1865. So if you can trace at least one enslaved Black American ancestor in your lineage back to that, almost 100-year time frame, plus your identity as a Black American, African American, then you would qualify. So I think anyone who migrated here in the 1980s would not have an ancestor who was enslaved as far back as that 100-year time frame. So that would disqualify them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think one thing I've come to learn in law is that there's always an exception. There's always some scenario that is the exception that proves the rule. But I think either way, to your point, like they would qualify as ADOS because they would meet both of the criteria, right? Like they have an enslaved descendant on American soil, and they've been in the United States and self-identified as Black for, more than 12 years.
I think the chances that you have of having a descendant of American slavery that left the country and came back is ridiculously small. Because think about it, if someone in your lineage was considered a slave in America, I mean, we think about everybody that we know. What do they say? Like, well, Octoroad is 1/16 Black, you're a slave. So the chances of you getting enough money, wealth, whatever to run to another country is ridiculously small. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I think that becomes a case where we're arguing less than 5%, less than 3%, I would even say. Because
sure.
This is that somebody got enslaved and ran away, and then even came back in the 80s. Because at that point, you've identified to another culture, and why would you come back here? Because if you were leaving America at that point in time, you understood this was a horrible place to be if you're Black. Why would you come back? Because Black people aren't doing better now than we were then. Looking at the data, so that would
go ahead.
Even come back, in my opinion.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Howe.
Well, my comment is when they mention lineage, I think they're going by grandparents and great opposed to aunts and uncles. But for most Black people, our lineage, we're cut off from that African side. And I think, I don't even know the name of my ancestor that came from Africa. You know what I mean? So the point of us being able to trace and even identify going back through the lineage in Africa is, again, as Kiara mentioned, that's hard. I don't think again, he mentioned an exception, but that's a tall order to face as far as being somebody not making it with the lineage. Sorry about that. I'm breaking up.
No, you're fine. And I think, hold on, let me get this. Okay. No, you're fine. I think also, when you consider the enslaved Black Americans who did leave the country, I think after the Revolutionary War, we did have some who deflected to the British Army and they were allowed to become British citizens. So in that example, if you had British or Black British who came back to America and then they identified as Black here, I can see how you might see like, oh, they would, if they lived here for at least 12 years, they would qualify. But then it's like they wouldn't identify as Black American. They would identify as Black British American.
Unless they change their citizenship. And to your point about a Revolutionary War, Henry Washington, one of George Washington's slaves, is a perfect example of that. I don't know if defected is the right word, but he escaped from George Washington and switched sides to the British, and then he was one of the former slaves who was, I think he was on the ship that went to Sierra Leone under the promise from the British Empire that there would be they would have land. I mean, basically the 40 acres and a mule scenario, but in Sierra Leone. I mean, I could see us, like, and to Leighton's point, like, why would anyone leave and want to come back knowing how things are in this country? Like, Yeah, that's a great question, but people do things all the time for all kinds of different reasons. So anyway, I was just thinking about it in respect to the larger conversation of like why would Sheila Jackson Lee use the term descendants of African slaves as opposed to American descendants of slaves?
All right, Miss Al, did you want to say something? Hold on, you're muted. Okay. Well, to that I would say, I think you would have to consider the priority that ADOS has is that we have been here the whole time. You know, from 1619 until today. So you have to consider that the Black Americans who never left this country, who weren't repatriated, who have been here from the time of the first slave ships arriving to when America was formed as a country, all through Black codes and Jim Crow and mass incarceration. So we've been here through all of that. And that's what we're saying our justice claim is to reparations. It's like we have suffered through 400 plus years of systemic oppression. That is our unique justice claim to reparations. No one else in this country has that claim. Whether you defected to the British and you decide like, oh, if they're gonna, you know, pass reparations, well, I know my ancestors were enslaved here, let me come on back. Well, again, your claim is different because you haven't been in America suffering as a bottom caste for, you know, those 400 plus years.
Right. That's kind of my question and my point, that like, so that creates a de facto requirement that you have to prove that there's the direct unbroken like habituation requirement, you know, residence requirement for that entire period of time.
I would say yes to that. And I would also say any Black American who has been in this country, who has had ancestors living in this country since the 1600s would be able to prove that. All right, Ms. Saad, did you want to say something?
Yeah, my comment. Yeah, going back to the British, remember the Loyalists, they were evacuated to Nova Scotia. And that's what happened to the Blacks that sided with the British. And secondly, they are entitled to discriminations. The Blacks that came in, I guess the 1960s, they did suffer some types of discrimination, but again, their claim is not the same as our claim. Again, it appears as if Jackson Lee is trying to include the entire diaspora, but we know it's not true. Again, we got to get the information out, because just a few people knowing, you know, I think that's our purpose. The more people know just how huge this is, I think the better off we are as far as what our fight and claim. is. That's it.
Sorry, y'all. I was listening, but I had to use the bathroom. But I think in this case, what is going to be our biggest, I think our biggest weapon or our biggest knife in terms of the direction that Sheila Jackson Lee is pushing, all of the majority of the oppression and the issues and the things that we've researched that we have found has impacted us in a major way. Majority of that happens before 1965. Majority of it. Because we're talking about Jim Crow, we're talking about slavery, we're talking about peonage, we're talking about sharecropping. All of that happens before 65. And that's the bulk of our case. So my thing is, at that point, if you can't prove you was here before then, we're not talking about you. Or you're what I would consider you're on the fringe group. Now you can get reparations for the mistreatment of people or African people that have came here in the 80s. Well, you know, because most African immigrants arrived here in the 80s or after 65, regardless, I don't think it matters. I think what's going to happen is you're going to have to differentiate yourself from us during that time period. And I don't think the data is going to show anything of any significance. Once you look at the Black immigrant struggle after 65, I don't think you see it. Because if you look at the wealth ratios currently, their wealth ratios are way higher than ours. You know what I'm saying? Like their job improved, you know, they're getting hired into corporate America, you know, with their, you know, salaries and being able to save and send that money home. All of that is very clear once you look at the IRS micro data, like the group of people that identify as African immigrants, they aren't like us. So I think it's not, that's what I was telling y'all earlier. I don't think it's gonna make a difference. Her speaking is all we need to do. Because once you do the research, understand, she don't know none of these that we talking about. I don't think anybody does. Because if you do, that's when you realize like there's a real case here. And this really isn't as hard as we think it is. We just need to make our information known in the mainstream world. Because once that becomes known, what is your comeback? Like we can't do it now. Because generally, and we've talked about this, you know, I heard Yvette and Tone talk about this a lot. The issue is going to be we just can't write a check for $20 trillion. We can't do that. And that's what we're like, okay, well, just write me one for 10 and we'll figure out the other 10. Like, we're kind of negotiable on how we receive the funds, as long as the number is solidified and we understand that it's an intergenerational policy. So I think, like I said, y'all, I've been watching it for a while, just mainstream media and comparing that to our conversations that we've been having. And I feel like everything, I have yet to hear anybody in mainstream America echo anything that we've never heard before. Because we've asked all those questions, we've done all that research, and we understand why some of the things that they're going for, like we're talking about now, reparations for all the Black diaspora, that sounds good, but you can't prove that. And you're gonna need to prove that in Supreme Court. And I don't know that the information exists to do that. But if it does, they should very well, because think about it, we included in that too, y'all. That means we'll get 2 checks. We'll get the check for the descendants of slaves, and then we get the Black American check. Because all of this is us. For real. I just probably, you know, I probably won't be fighting on the Black American diaspora reparations before I'm fighting for ADOS reparations. But after we get ADOS reparations, I will have no problem going over there and giving all I can to help the rest of Black America. I just believe in sweeping my front door before I sweep yours.
I think the thing about that is, I think when it actually comes to the payment, some are saying that a reparations agenda that includes other Black immigrant groups isn't pure reparations for ADOS, and that, you know, the U.S. government could be like, well, there's your reparations. You know, we created an agenda for the whole diaspora, and there you go.
I think where we win in that case, we don't have a case. The case that we've been building isn't an African diaspora case. It's an ADOS case. So I think the government is well aware of it. Very much, because just like we think about what Joe said, right? Joe was like, I wouldn't mind passing the reparations initiative if we can include Indian Americans, Native Americans. But it's like, if you include Native Americans, that's no longer reparations. Because if you include Native Americans, you might as well include white people. Because Native Americans enslaved Africans. White people enslaved Africans. And we're not going to do another Emancipation Proclamation, because that'll be the first thing I bring up. So this is Emancipation Proclamation. You're paying slave owners for the lost wages of their slaves. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, who you think you're talking to? Because that's not gonna fly with us. I think a lot of stuff don't fly with us. Just because we know the research, we know the history, we know the policy, we know how world moves. And I think, Darren is a big part of it, to be honest.
All right, Miss Al, we'll let Miss Al give a comment, and then we'll kind of move on to what Leighton mentioned earlier about UBI.
I just wanted to mention what Mullen and Doherty emphasized last week. If it doesn't close the wealth gap, it's not reparations. And we need to keep that in the forefront of our minds. Anything else, if it doesn't close the wealth gap, it's not reparations. So we know what to look for. With whatever agenda that they give us, that's the first item to be critiqued. So that's all. We are aware of it's going to be ambiguous legislation, but we're prepared for that.
Well, I think that's actually a good segue. So, so with closing the wealth gap, we've already kind of discussed some of the amounts that would be sufficient. But I think one point that I'm so glad was talked about is how we do need to close the wealth gap. But also when it comes to the effects of systemic racism, the suffering, we need a dollar amount that accounts for that as well. I believe. I think it's Leighton who said that, and I agree. Like I think any ADOS would agree. So when it comes to the actual dollar amount for reparations, how does that get paid?
Think about this, like and again, like I always say, if I'm off, I want y'all to be the first people to check me. But a lot of the questions that I feel like we propose, there's already a rubric for. So when we look into law, and Brian, I would love to hear your comeback. I mean, your response to this. But it's the same thing in law. How do you, in law, if I'm in a car accident and I'm out of work for 3 months, there's some type of way that's calculated. Or it's just a guess number. And I'm not sure, but I know that this happens so much that there's already a rubric for it. So I just feel like, why don't we just follow the same rubrics that we already have? And I think that's the biggest claim that we have. We're not asking for special treatment. We're not asking that you do anything above and beyond for us. We're just asking you do to us what you've done to everybody else. Like I said, you've given Japanese Americans reparations. I think in the Obama administration, Japanese descendants got like $80 million. Like that was just a couple years ago. So it's like we're not asking for nothing that you haven't already done. And when it comes to calculating that amount, just do it the way we've always done it. And if there's no arbitrary, if there's no formula, and it's just an arbitrary number, hell, shoot for the stars. Why not? You know what I'm saying? Like I do it the way that we've been doing it. I don't know that we have to recreate the wheel in every instance in this point. You know what I mean? I think we should just follow what we've been doing.
Well, that's why I was looking at the UBI plan, which Andrew Yang championed, and I think that would work for us. As far as same, it's not not his exactly, like, because I think with UBI, his was generalized. Like he was saying that everyone should qualify. I mean, I think me personally that with the general UBI plan, I don't think it should everyone should be allowed to qualify. I think it should go, and then this would become a class issue, but it should only be our only people with incomes below a certain level and wealth below a certain level should qualify for that. That way, it's it's elevating the people who need it. But I was looking at them as like, okay, they're championing a specific amount of money going to people who need it every month. And I think with reparations and as I say, cutting the checks, sure, you can argue like, okay, we can't write y'all checks for the full amount, whatever hundreds of thousands that you demand. We can't write all those checks at once, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. The government does all sorts of things. I'm like, oh, y'all can do that, but I don't know. But let's just assume that they can't write each individual Black ADOS American a check for $800,000, or they can't ship all those checks out at once. You know, you think they can?
Listen, this is because I for a long time have been looking to a good scholarship educated response to that question. And I feel like what's been like Corona, I really feel like it's a gift and a curse because Corona happened like 15 trillion with the airlines, no, common people. No, you got it. And I would even go so far as to say this would probably benefit the American economy more than anything we can do by putting money in the hands of descendants of slaves. Because everybody know we spend money with everybody. Everybody know that. So essentially, I don't think there's a bigger way to stimulate the economy than put it in the hands of people that's going to exchange the money for goods. And y'all know we spend up everything. So
But hold on, but that's not reparations. If you're giving us money so that we can put it back into the economy, that's not reparations. That's not uplifting. That's not elevating Black Americans. That's just giving us money so that we can uplift the economy.
So picture what I'm saying. I get Kiara 800,000, right? Now this goes. I'm gonna kind of flow with me here because this is a real big hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
Now, given you're taking advantage of lineage therapy, given you're taking advantage of the financial literacy that's a part of our reparations package. Now you understand I can't go buy beans and a Maserati. You see what I'm saying? You go into your neighborhood, you buy a home, you fix up the pipes and all of the infrastructure in that area. Then you begin to put some more money into a community center, let's say. I'm not saying throw all this money back. I'm saying build up your community with the money I gave you. Now think about this. Also with this lineage therapy, also with this financial literacy. Say I'm a carpenter, a Black carpenter that doesn't get a lot of white businesses because I'm a descendant of a slave as well. Now you come to me to do that work. I take that work, the money that you pay me to build your community center. Now I go to the Black hardware store because there's somebody that has a Black hardware store. And I get my stuff from here, my supplies and all. And essentially what you begin to create is another Black Wall Street. The issue with receiving all of that money, just like we talk about all the time, we have to spend that money within our own communities to keep it, insulated. Now you going from Black person to Black person to Black person, Now essentially you recreate Black Wall Street. That does stimulate the economy. The issue with that is white people got mad and went in there and burned up everybody. So I think it very much stimulates the economy by spending it. Is where you're spending it and how you spend it. Because if you're spending it to, like we talk about, we have to have ownership in manufacturing. We have to own places that produce goods. If you're spending your money there and your community is supporting the products that you're putting out, it becomes a big circle. Because essentially that's how we want it anyway, is to be a part of America's big circle of economy. But what we found out based on all the data, they just shut us out from the beginning to the present. And that's all we're trying to do. I just think at this point, I know for me personally, I won't speak on ADOS and I won't speak on this group. But me personally, I feel like I don't know that I even want to be a part of that anymore. Like, I just want to take care of my people because they're going to do right by me. I don't believe America's going to do right by me. And until they show and prove that, I damn sure ain't going to believe on nothing because it's 400 years of you not doing it. And I don't need more than an apology, Joe Biden, on mass incarceration to fix this shit and everything else that came with it. So I think as long as we're smart about it and we understand how wealth moves and where to spend money and how to build and how to create, I think not only would it be a big uplift for Black America, but it would also be a big uplift for America because we do spend our money with everybody and that's been proven.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm still gonna say, like, I mean, and again, these are just my personal thoughts. It's always bothered me when people try to tote one of the plus sides of Black American reparations as an uplift to the entire American economy, because no one says that about corporate bailouts. No one says, oh, we're going to give these corporations billions and trillions of dollars and it's going to help everybody. No, it helps them. It lines their pockets. And there is no trickle down. You know, they gave us $1,200 and said good luck. And then they were mad when we put it in our savings and we didn't spend it like they wanted us to. Hold on, let me I think I saw that article. Let me see where I shared it. Be right back. So
Can I jump in on Leighton's?
Oh, got it. Okay.
Or go ahead.
Oh no, I'm talking to myself. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I 100% agree with what Leighton just said, and I want to, Leighton, you called me out on my thoughts on like how the law creates a number to, you know, make someone whole, like say in a car accident if they lose a limb or something like that, or if someone loses their life. And I think you're right, it is arbitrary. I mean, you know, it's just a lot of times it's based on the economics of the time period when it happens. But yeah, it's not like, there's definitely not like an aspect of the criminal code or the civil code which explicitly says, you know, a human life is worth X amount times the cost of living times inflation. You know, it's, you basically just make that shit up on the fly. And then one other thing I want to say real quick, and I'll jump back into mute and turn it back over to you, Kara. And this relates to Leighton's final comment too, is I got to push back a little bit on what you just said about the messaging that goes along with corporate bailouts. I mean, I think that they very explicitly do say we have to do this because it's necessary for the economy, i.e. it's good for the economy. The effect, as you rightly pointed out, is the exact fucking opposite. It directly goes into the coffers of big banks and it lines the pockets of the CEOs of big banks. But they absolutely make that argument in the greater public, you know, as a way of justifying that theft. And I totally understand the reluctance to say, like, you know, we don't need to make the argument that reparations are good because it helps everybody. Like, you need to make the moral argument that reparations are good and necessary because it's deserved and it's just. But I don't think there's anything wrong with also saying, like, as Leighton was pointing out, like, you're going to get that money and you're going to spend it in the Black community, and that's going to make the Black community healthier and more robust, and it's going to stave off the effects of intergenerational theft by the larger world, the larger domestic U.S. and international system. So I think that it's not necessarily the most important talking point, but I think it is important to recognize that. That's all I got.
I'd like to add a little something to that real quick. Just that, in that I feel like one thing that's never been an issue, or I think a distinction needs to be understood, that America doesn't have a problem with reparations. They've never had a problem with reparations. That's never been an issue. It's reparations for Black people that's been an issue. It's always been an issue. So, in you know what you're saying, Brian, I feel like that portion of that argument that you're making kind of needs to be added into that, just to kind of make it, you know, to make the argument whole, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's right too.
Yeah, because they are definitely good and just. I don't think anybody in America would ever argue that. And like, if you probably did a survey and just like went down the street in random town USA, you know, you just didn't say for who, but you said if the people went through treacherous situations caused by the government that they have served, stood for, and stood behind and backed loyally, but their whole existence started off as a wrong to their whole positioning in that country, would you think that they deserve any sort of reparations? I think if placed in that sort of context, most people would say yeah. Then if you say, okay, well, this is for Black people, that's when the issue would occur.
Specifically, if you were to remove ADOS and just insert the word Irish into everything that we talk about, I honestly feel like reparations could be passed by the end of 2021.
Bruh, yeah, all day.
I honestly believe that, because
Hold on, could you say that again?
So we know how in all of our legislations, you know, we're considered, you know, people of color, Black, minority, African American, Negro, colored, all this other shit. If you remove all of those words and insert Irish Americans, we have reparations by the end of 2021, for sure. Because I already hear arguments now that, oh, did you know the Irish were the real enslaved peoples and all this other bullshit. And when we think about the New Deal was created specifically for Irish Americans, specifically, because they were turning into gangsters and the mobs and all of that up in the Northeast. And in order to essentially introduce resources into their community, they were first picked for those service jobs like policemen, firemen, you know, all your municipality jobs. That's the jobs that were created for that group of people. Therefore, they no longer had to rob, cheat, and steal. They had good careers. And I think when we think about it in our community, we look at it as, well, white people work hard to save their money. The fuck they don't. That's not what happened. There was an issue in America. Legislators and policymakers created specific laws to help specific communities be better off. And that's how it happened. Same with the Homestead Act. Same with the GI, the GI Bill. It's the same thing. I think the only difference is that ain't for niggas. Like, that ain't for us. Like, we weren't able to take advantage of those, you know, those policies and those programs. And that's what we're saying now. And that's a part of our case too. You know what I'm saying? That we didn't live in the same America as everybody else. But the difference between us and everybody else, we can prove it. You know what I'm saying? They can't.
I want to jump in as an Irish American and say I totally agree with all of that.
I wonder, and Brian, you may can or can't speak to this because I essentially look at it as like the blue code of silence and the blue wall and all that bullshit. When we discuss those things, and I think to me the measure of a man is I can come to you and say, no, they played you, and that's wrong. And I'm gonna say something about it where it counts. You see what I'm saying? Because a lot of times I feel like Irish Americans very well understand what America has did for them. Very well. But then when it comes to us fighting, everybody turn a blind eye. And this ain't just towards Irish people. But it's more than Irish people. But in this case, we're gonna talk about Irish people. Seeing, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, seeing people treated the way Black people have been treated over the course of American history, and seeing everybody turn their head, like it's extremely hard for me to believe that any religious aspect, because everybody's Christian, Catholic, or whatever. As far as I'm concerned, that's full of shit. Because there's no way you can see a human being treated that way and you don't do shit. Number one. And number two, I always look at it like when I'm fighting for my people in these spaces, people that understand my struggle or a part of it work against me because they understand working against me is better for them and their community. And I think for me, and again, say the ADOS message. Y'all know I like to be very clear when I feel like I'm on some me stuff and I'm stepping away from ADOS. As far as I'm concerned, when I get in them spaces, it ain't no friends. Everybody has benefited from the murder and oppression of my people over the last 400 years. You're not my friend. If you're not John Brown, you're not on my team. And I'm real vigilant about that because I'm not gonna sit here and allow these people to smile in my face and act like they here for me and mine. When you're the reason we've been in this position so long, we ain't forgot. And I can't speak to everybody else in this chat, but I'm real close to all my grandparents. I know them stories. I feel them stories. That boy's gonna be hurt. And I'm not gonna pull no punches, and I don't give a fuck about making you feel comfortable or not. I don't care about your discomfort. Now we understand that we're a nonviolent group, and I always want to make that clear. But when we have those conversations and we speaking on what we gotta get done, I don't give a fuck about your feelings. I don't give a fuck about how it affects you in a negative way. I've been holding your L's for 400 years. You finna take this one. Everybody finna take it. Intellectually, politically. But that voice will be heard. Fannie Lou Hamer will be heard. Fred Hampton will be heard. For sure, for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say to that, I think it's not. I mean, it's just the truth of one thing and one thing only. If you're in this group, you're pushing for reparations. White, Black, African American, Irish American, whatever. If you're showing up to ADOSKC, it's because you want Black Americans to get reparations, and you're doing what you need to do to make that happen. So, and I'm sure that that's why all of us are here.
Facts. Big facts. Big old facts.
Can I jump in and qualify that I don't actually consider myself an Irish American in the sense that, like, my granddad was a member of the ancient order of Hibernians, which was an Irish cultural and maybe pseudo spiritual organization. And my mother was 100% Irish. My dad is not, but I just want to be clear, like, I don't go around living my life thinking about like my cultural heritage from Ireland because I'm completely disconnected from that, and I was gonna say one more thing. It escapes me now. Sorry.
I was gonna say that's interesting just from my perspective. Like I never disconnect from my Black American culture. Like,
Do you have a choice?
no, I don't have a choice, but it's like I love, like, I'm proud of being ADOS. I'm proud of being Black American. I'm proud of my ancestors.
And
So I really do consider that daily. Just even before ADOS, like I was always trying to, I may have been wrong about it. I think we've all had those missteps and what you don't know and blah blah blah. But I guess that's just a part of being Black American. You can't disassociate from your
you
heritage.
can.
You know, I,
Clear
I,
Thomas.
I don't even think, even when you're talking about,
Claire Thomas.
boule blacks or upper class blacks, Black Americans, they're still Black American within whatever social networks they manage to move into. Like they're never not considered Black American. I can't imagine any Black American in this country ever elevating themselves to a space so high that they don't have to deal with some of the aspects of what it is to be Black American.
I
And
don't know if you let that sportscaster out here. I can't remember his name, but that fat sportscaster. If you talk to him, he would tell you, he would argue definitely against what you're saying right now. But I think to what Brian, I can't remember his name. It'll come to me in a second.
Tarico.
I'm sorry, what you said?
Mike Tirico.
No, not Mike Tirico. Not
Oh,
not
what's
him.
Tirico?
He's the Greek dude. I'm talking about the one from here.
Oh.
Yeah. But Mike Tirico is like half Greek, half black, and he says he's not black at all. And I'm like, okay, cool, sure. But I guess to kind of to Brian's point, I guess that's kind of the part of the, and I don't want to keep like throwing it out there like a cuss word, but kind of like the privilege of like when you can not have to worry about your ethnicity and your ethnic makeup on a daily basis. Maybe that's part of the actual American goal. Maybe that's the American dream, and you can do so because you know that society as a whole has your back. Whereas I think for a lot of Black Americans, we know that regardless of kind of, and to Kiara's point, regardless of how high we rise, we still Black at the end of the day. So it's always funny when I hear people like, newscasters and all that, and journalists and sportscasters especially nowadays, getting upset at the likes of LeBron James and his ilk, talking about, yeah, we still face racial discrimination. Yeah, I still get, all of this stuff. I mean, before he moved to LA, his house had nigga spray painted on it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, what are we talking about? So, I mean, like, this stuff still happens, it still occurs, but, people who are in lesser positions or who feel like, well, you've got money should be the answer to everything. Like, money doesn't buy you respect. And, so even with reparations, like, for me, money is fine, but like, to have the respect that goes with it, or to have a level of respect, period. That, to me, that would go further, a whole lot further than just money. I think about, I don't know if you all watched the Watchmen series when it was on HBO, but like when they basically there was a portion in there where basically in this alternate universe, what was it, Robert Redford was the president, I think he was, and he had given out reparations, like he was president for years or something like that, and he had given Black people reparations and moved Black people to Oklahoma, and people would, even if Black people had money, they would look at you and say, "Oh, those are your well, I forget what they call them. Yeah, your Redford bucks. Those are your Redford bucks. Oh, okay, yeah." Like all of a sudden, your money is not it has lesser value in their eyes. You know, because of where you got it and the means under which it was attained. So to me, I'm like, you know, so money is one thing, but respect goes a whole lot further. And to me, that's what we still need to be aiming for, even if we get to the point of, you know, where there is an actual reparations amount going, we got a project program in place and all that stuff. Respect still needs to be aimed for.
Um, going going back to how we were talking about building up of a reparations agenda and the immediate effects of it once we start getting cash payments, and then what Leighton said and what Chris just said, and building ourselves up. I think do we, I mean, I don't want to say it. I don't want to ask it this way. I mean, we know the effects of 400 plus years of systemic oppression. Do we know how long it's going to take to fix those issues? Do we know what exactly it's going to take to fix those issues? So when we think about, okay, you know, we get reparations and we buy houses, we invest in our communities. Right now, those communities aren't ADOS centric. You know, if we buy a house, we have to deal with I'll say it this way. There are a lot of gaps in things that ADOS need. We need our own doctors. We need our own therapists. We need people who can get the college educations necessary to become those doctors. We need Black realtors. We need the training for Black realtors to even be able to get into the business. So I don't know. So I think, you know, my point is like, I'm I'm definitely all for the building up of our communities. I just think it's going to take much more than simply getting a house. And mhm.
To your point, I think when we think about what solves the issue, I think we have to be very specific in what caused it. So when we're looking at,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Chris said it's Jason Whitlock. That's the journalist he was talking about. And I'm laughing because yeah, we know. he, he
yeah,
would he would definitely say he's above us.
for
But
sure. Damn.
go ahead, Leighton.
Now, when you were saying like the solution, so when we're looking at how do we solve the effects of slavery in present day, we have to look at how it was caused. So this is, this has been a 400-year issue. Really it's a global issue because it started with enslaving people off the western coast of Africa and it just went everywhere. So now when we look at how do we fix it, I agree with you. Buying a house doesn't change it. You know what I'm saying? We do need Black doctors and lawyers and therapists, and, Black construction men and trades workers and all that. And I think the biggest, and I guess it's hard for some people to conceive, but I guess for us it's not. I know for me it ain't at all. It's been fucked up for 400 years. So now we have to try to fix it for 400 years. Like I can't see it taking any less than 400 years because it's a cycle. Like it's ingrained in our culture. Like it's ingrained that when a black person walks into an all-white store, it's 1,000 eyes on him and he gets followed around the store. That's a part of our problem. It may take 400 years. It may take 800 years to change that. I personally don't care how long it takes. I just know it's gonna have to change because I'm not gonna stop fighting until it do. And if that's way after I'm gone, maybe. But I'm gonna run my part of the race. And I think we have to look at it takes a couple generations to turn stuff around. And even once it gets turned around, I still feel like it needs to continue, like in terms of like getting direct payments to descendants of American slaves, because even once Africans were conditioned to the treatment that they were exposed to here, it continued to go on. Even after we understood we were slaves, we understood we wasn't getting out of it, we were still raped, robbed, murdered, and oppressed. So now, once it turns around and American society is like, oh, them the black people we enslaved for 400 years. We're going to have to treat them like this, or this is why they're in the position they're in, because their sacrifices to America is unlike anything we've ever seen in world history. That's why they get them checks, because they built all of this. And really, their checks ain't enough money than what they really should be getting. So it's just going to have to be accepted. Just like we had to accept that, you know, if you get caught in certain towns with the sun down, you might be some strange looking fruit that day. You know, and, you know, just to go blind in on what strange fruit is, that's the term black people use in the South for black people hanging from trees. They look like strange fruit. That's how I grew up. You know what I'm saying? Understanding it that way. It's just going to have to be intergenerational, though.
I have a comment. My comment stems around, I've started the half that that has never been told, and it was starting out in the 30s where there was over 2,000 Black people still alive and they were interviewed. And this is to touch on what Leighton mentioned about how we, and the disregard, Chris mentioned basically how we've been ignored in American culture. The only time we are even, I guess, addressed is in sports and entertainment. How can we change that? What can we do as individuals? Does it go back to getting the information out there? Do we start from the ground up? Because everything is pointing to institutionalized racism in education, healthcare, and stuff like that. What can we do from the groundwork to, I guess, bring awareness and change to these situations? So to add on to the question, my answer is I have no idea.
I think it's a change in culture, y'all. I really think that's the way we have to look at it. Because, you know, American culture is rooted in slavery. American culture is rooted in oppression. It has been for 400 years. So I think that's essentially the question we're asking ourselves. How long does it take to change a culture of a nation that's rooted in murdering, raping, robbing, stealing, killing, oppressing a certain group? How do you change that? None of that changes in a lifetime, in my opinion, because none of it was created in a lifetime. So I just think it's just gonna be it's an uphill fight, but we Black. We don't know nothing else. You know what I'm saying? Like, this to me ain't no harder than what we do every day. At least now we know our kids will benefit from this. Our grandkids, nieces, nephews, you know what I'm saying? All of that, all the younger generation, they'll benefit from this fight. And as we have taken up, I feel like we've taken up the torch to continue the fight of Malcolm and Martin and Fannie Lou Hamer, you know, all of the activists that have come before us. We gotta do the same thing because, you know, like Martin said, probably ain't gonna get to the top of that mountain with you. And sitting at the top of that mountain, I would love to tell Martin, it ain't nothing like you thought it would look like, player. It's all kind of stuff going on up there. Like, this ain't it. this ain't it.
I think that's another really good segue to move into the us sharing our thoughts on election results. You know, because right now we're talking about how ADOS can change the perception of Black Americans. In the chat, Chris is talking about the election results and how he wishes, or he would have been fine with the Trump victory, because then we still have to deal with, you know, the exposure of racism that his presidency made happen. I just want us to watch a video. Where is it? If I can find it. So, okay. So this video is some of the coverage of election celebrations in Kansas City. It's about 3 minutes. I'm just going to share my screen so we can all watch it together. All right, you guys have to let me know if you can hear it.
No sound. Oh, there we go.
We persevere. We persevere. A so-called president who.
Oh, sorry, hold on. Let me go back.
I was gonna say, can you maximize the size?
I can't see on here.
Can you see it? Hold on, let me stop share. Let me try it again. Hold on.
I didn't have any problems at all. I could hear and see it.
Okay.
We persevere. Who supported the taking away of healthcare for poor people in the country. But we persevere. So I have to admit, I am super excited. Who's excited about buying hair? But I have to say that I have on this pink and this green, and I'm African American, and I'm more excited that we finally put a Black woman in the White House. But it goes a little further than that. Biden and Harris demonstrate not only that when African American women put their face on the line, we win. We can no longer have a president that says they're pretty fine people when they run over people that are exercising their constitutional right of free speech. And as a former journalist, I'm looking forward to having someone who speaks clear sentences with grammar, doesn't incite argument, doesn't incite violence, and actually doesn't make the press seem like the enemy. I was always taught that the press is the friend of America. So let's go back to that. Feels like the weight has been lifted off of our shoulders. Did anybody else out there feel that way? It's a great year because, in the words of great Sam Cooke, he said, it's been a long time coming, but a we needed that change in the White House. And we have a president-elect, Joe Biden, who I supported from day one, that has empathy for our country. And that's what we need all the way down to the United States, empathy for each other. We need to start put ourselves in each other's shoes. Because if you put yourself in each other's shoes, if you walk the walk that they're walking. They said in order to help someone be better, you have to care about them more than you care about yourself.
Okay. I'm sorry. Did you guys hear it? Okay.
I heard very little of it.
Me too. I didn't hear much of that.
I heard some of it.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I heard the part about finally putting a black woman in the White House.
But you know, I'm sorry. So what was the I guess the point to that? The only reason I'm asking is because I heard that there is a Republican Trump rally actually taking place today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This afternoon.
Yeah. So, so what context are we to look at that you just showed us?
We should look at it in the context of this is what our Black American leadership in Kansas City is saying about the election, and how ADOS has an uphill battle in convincing such people that we should not be celebrating this as a win for Black Americans. I'm sorry. I'll put a link to the story or that video in the chat. Go ahead, Miss Al. You can jump in.
My comment is, I am afraid for Black people. Kamala and her cabinet and Biden and his cabinet, with that chief of staff, we're busy celebrating, and most went back to being the sleepy voters. And now, they're celebrating. I'm really afraid for this, because this could really balloon into another serious crime bill. And that's all I have to say.
I think I think Al's right. And I honestly am a little excited more so in this point, because I feel 90% of our community was all about anybody but Trump. Get Trump out of the White House, get Trump out of the White House. So now Trump's out of the White House. Well, technically. So now I think this is where the real politics begin. Because now you got your average, hey, we got to get him out. Now it's like, just like we were talking to earlier, Karen, when you were making the point about the exit polls, seeing who voted for who. When you look at, the Black vote for Biden, like I think they were saying that Black women voted higher for Biden than they did for Hillary. And they was also looking at, I think it was Yvette that was talking about, so Black people in general voted more for Trump in this election than we did in the previous election. But then it causes a conversation about what was the purpose in bringing Kamala onto the ticket if more Black women were going to vote for Trump. And essentially what they're saying is she failed to deliver the Black vote. And what it made me think about was during the primaries, I never heard a lot of people championing Kamala. Most of the sisters that I heard was for Elizabeth Warren. And so it's like, we can't jump on the sister girl train now that she's in the White House. Because when it was time to really give her that support, y'all wasn't rocking with her for good reason, in my opinion. But I do think this is the time that we show the political work. Like I was saying, I think it could balloon into something major. But what's not major about what we've been doing? Like we've been doing this. We've been advocating And this is the real work. So now we see, black people came out. I'm not sure if it was record numbers, but black people really came out and supported by it. And now what I think 90% of our constituency doesn't understand, when you come out in record numbers to put somebody in the White House, you're supposed to get record resources. You're supposed to get a lot of resources. And I don't think nobody understands that but us. Because the people that I always talk to, they always say, well, we got him out the White House. Now you just need to go to work and save your money. No, that ain't how it go. That ain't how it go. It's an exchange. You want my vote? I need this policy. And I need it enforced. And if you can't enforce the stuff you're talking about, ain't no point in me voting for you. And I think we have to now put Biden and Kamala on Front Street. Black people showed up. What are you doing for black people? And when you give me this Black American plan, when you give me this Black diaspora plan, understand none of that was in the articles that I read that talks about what Biden's doing in the first 100 days. Ain't none of that on there. So why is you fighting for all these people that didn't come out and vote in record numbers for you? And that's because you take our vote for granted. You feel like you're going to get it anyway. And that's when we have to be vigilant to push him. The same way that, Frederick Douglass pushed, I forget who the president was when Frederick Douglass was around, but he pushed that president, Malcolm and Martin pushed Lyndon B. Johnson. It's the same thing. We're just going to have to push him. He worked for us, pretty much.
Did you guys see the marches in Detroit on, God, it might have been election day and or several days after? And pardon my French, I'm just going to repeat the chant, which does include some foul language. It was essentially, the chant was, and this was from what I can tell, it was almost exclusively a Black populated march and protest, but it was essentially, F Trump, F Biden too. They don't give an F about you. Did you guys see the video of that?
No, but I understand.
I missed it too, but yeah, stay right on.
Yeah, and I bring that up. It's just a way of saying I agree with Alvonia and Leighton and everybody. Like, I don't think that we go back to normal, And I think I get so frustrated with, particularly people.
I think there's no going back. Like we need, what we need to do is formulate a new normal. We need to define what our new normal is.
Mm-hmm.
People.
I agree.
Hold on, I'm kind of jumping into a different topic. So I'll say this point, then kind of go back to the election results. People are pushing for economic recovery in a time when Black Americans aren't projected to fully recover from COVID, the effects of COVID, for another 4 to 5 years. We need to formulate plans for how to handle that. While we got people dancing and singing in the streets, Black Americans aren't projected to recover from COVID until 2025. All right, so I'll say that, and we'll kind of jump, but I wanted to share the data from Associated Press about who voted for who. So here we can see that 59% of white men and 52% of white women voted for Trump. At first, the figures were showing that I think about 80 or only 80% of Black men voted for Biden. But I think once more votes were counted, they updated those figures. So now it's 86% of Black men, 93% of Black women voted for Biden. Nobody else comes close. Everybody else, Latinos and all others, they're in the, 50s and 60s.
Hmm.
I mean, what Leighton said about, we voted for him and we should have gotten something for that.
Yeah, I'm a huge supporter of that. I feel like, I mean, there were all these neoliberals who were, trying to quell the fires of people who, like ADOS, were basically looking at the Democratic Party and saying, well, what have y'all ever done for us? Like there were people who were out there who were, just, not ADOS, who were also, feeling and making those same statements. And the neo-libs were out there, basically saying, hey, no, calm down. Hey, it's fine. Look, we just need to go blue down ballot and make sure we go, vote the drunk out of the presidential office and get Biden in there. And then after he gets in, we'll hold his feet to the fire. Where's the fight? Where's the fire feet holding? Where's that part? Because personally, I think you can hold his feet to the fire, but all he's gonna feel that as is him having his feet up, sitting in his best chair in front of the fireplace. So that's not exactly his feet to the fire. But that's, to me, and now granted, this is still in its early stages, but that's kind of where I feel like this is gonna go. I mean, as we see with some of the more progressives that are in the Democratic Party, who I would say are, more so actually leaning toward, or would be more prone to lean towards an ADOS, or at least taking an ADOS audience. Let's just go start there. I think, when we look at the establishment Democrats and the fact that they don't interact much with the progressives who are there, that tells quite a bit about where the Democratic Party is, and what their actual agenda is. Like they talk, and we said it's funny because we actually talked about this on the podcast last night. But it's like the Democratic Party considers themselves the big tent. We're for LGBTQ, we're for women's rights, we're for minorities and immigrants, and Black people, Latinos, and whatnot. Okay, sure. But what do we always see as their representation? A centrist white, like, and a centrist white person in some sort of capacity that the Democratic Party itself isn't even galvanized behind. So, I mean, like, that's always been the plan. That's always been the ploy. Hey, everybody, we're going to represent all y'all. But by the way, we don't have anybody who looks, represents, or even talks to y'all that's going to go forward with the message. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. But that's continually what we've been seeing, what we have seen. And it's like, okay, so if that's the case, how is that going to be any different this time around? That's why I was saying, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. That's why I was saying, like, I would have been fine, had Trump won again, fine. Because my day-to-day, now granted, yeah, Supreme Courts and court appointees and all that stuff, of course, it'll be a lot of input and impact on that. But I think ultimately, a second Trump term would lead to an ultimate destruction of the government as we know it. And I'd be fine with that because it hasn't been working to my benefit. It has been working largely to my benefit anyway.
Say that.
Mm-hmm. But I know I'm one of few.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead, Miss Al. My bad.
No problem. My comment is about Whip Claiborne, how he was on CNN and mentioned, we don't need anything. Did anyone else see when he said that on TV? I almost threw something at the TV. I was so up in arms. I think our biggest job is to make sure we get elected officials that represent us, that represents what we need, because apparently we don't have elected officials that's looking out for our collective best interest. That's my comment.
No, you're absolutely right. And I felt like when Claiborne made that statement, he was just speaking for himself. I mean, granted, he's an 80-year-old black man in South Carolina, but let's be real. When the primaries were going on, Biden didn't have a chance until South Carolina, and
Fast.
that was only because of Claiborne and what he did to get the Democrats there galvanized behind Joe Biden. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be talking about Joe Biden right now. And so and so when I look at that just that scenario in itself, the fact that Claiborne said that nothing, that we don't need anything, I think more majorly he was speaking for himself, but even in that position, he should have taken anyway. I won't go down that road, but I think it's also interesting the fact that the guy who was in South Carolina, also who was running against Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham for the Senate, the brother who raised over $100 million in campaign donations and all that, who lost, now Joe Biden is tapping this dude and saying that he's going to be one of the leaders of the Democratic Party. And I'm thinking, who is this dude? He had no black agenda when he was in South Carolina. So what is he going to do on a national level besides be, and I hate to put it like this, but besides be another puppet along the lines of Stacey Abrams or Andrew Gillum before he decided to come out the closet?
Well, I think we have to realize what's happening with Biden right now. I'm going to share a quote from Rep. Emmanuel Cleaver that hopefully will give an idea about what Biden's administration is going to be all about.
Mm-hmm. Before you play that, I just think while you're getting that together, I just think it was interesting when Biden first started, he was talking to his private donors, and the video got leaked, and he said, nothing's going to change. I still think that's poignant as hell, because in large part from what we've seen from the Biden administration, from his website, from his agenda, quote unquote, there isn't much that's going to change.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Okay. No, here's the quote from Rep. Cleaver. He was giving his opinion in response to our Republican reps who have not recognized Biden as president-elect. And he says, when Republicans in positions of leadership refuse to publicly congratulate or even acknowledge that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. is president-elect of the United States of America, it darkens our international image.
Wow.
Keep those words in mind, international image, and promote the poisonous political atmosphere under which we all live. This is a low water moment in our nation when some of its leaders warp themselves in nonsensical silence on the results of this election.
Wow. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. Chris, Miss Al was asking about the name of your podcast.
I'm sorry. It's the Kansas City Info Rail, KC Info Rail. We do, I think, every Friday night around 8:30. We do it live. It's live on Facebook and Instagram, but we also rebroadcast it so you can check out the audio. The videos we also post on YouTube, but the audio is on Spotify, SoundCloud, and Anchor.
Can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Can I jump in and make a point real quick? When we talk about neoliberalism and holding Joe Biden's feet to the fire, whether or not Biden and Harris are going to acknowledge, acknowledge them, much less advocate for, stump for, push for programs that directly affect the ADOS community. I don't think we can have this conversation in that micro context or even in the larger macro context. And I think what I'm about to say relates to Kiara, what you're intimating with the global or the international commentary. And Leighton, you've talked about this, and I know Antoine's talked about it a lot. But I mean, we can't talk about any of this without including Wall Street. You know, like Chris, you were talking about Jamie Harrison against Lindsey Graham. Jamie Harrison is like a quintessential neoliberal. Like he's a former lobbyist.
Yep.
You know, I mean, Jim Clyburn, like all these guys, regardless of their race, their color, their ethnic background, like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Dick Durbin, you know, all these people that have been in Congress or the Senate for decades and decades, they're all filthy rich now. You know, they have no connection to what's going on the ground, you know, no connection to how people are actually living their lives, you know, and without that connection, they're not going to push for anything, you know, how could they don't understand it. That's it. That's all I want to say.
And I think we have to keep that in mind about most of our elected officials, because a lot of times, like I say, in our community, I feel like we understand politics as, you know, we vote for this person. You know, most of us believe in identity politics well. Because like what we hear now is, oh, you know, we have the most, you know, Black elected officials ever. You know what I'm saying? There have never been more Black people or people of color in elected office than what we have currently. And with that being said, like I have this conversation often with people. It don't do me no good for you to be Black in an office and can't advocate for my community. If you're not in there fighting for me, I don't care that you're there. Like if there's a white person up there that was fighting for my community, I would vote for them. Cause like you being Black in Congress don't mean nothing. If Black people if Black people in America are being persecuted and, you know, we're not receiving what we need to be, you know, to be normal in America, then no, I don't care that you're there. Just like with the Kamala thing, I don't care that the first woman of color is in the White House if she's saying shit like, if she's saying things like, no, I'm not going to do anything specific for Black people. I don't care that you're there. I would prefer you not be there, to be totally honest. But I think like speaking of what Brian's saying, we have to have a better understanding of, you know, where our community sits and what actually means something. Like policy means something, legislation means something. And, you know, at this point, as far as I'm concerned, if it ain't closing the racial wealth gap, I don't care about it. Because that, to me, and this is coming from Dr. Daniel, which is actually the reason why I asked him the question. Out of his mouth, there's nothing more detrimental to descendants of American slaves in America than the racial wealth gap, period. And I'll stand on that, you know, in front of anybody.
But obviously that's what Black Americans should be focusing on, but the majority of us aren't. I think Biden's presidency is going to be all about convincing the world that we are we're still the global power. I think Trump was focused on nationalism in the worst way. He rallied his white supremacist base, and our allies across the world were turned off from that. So he's going to spend the next 4 years trying to convince them that no, America's not this anti-immigrant nation, that we're still the melting pot that we've always been. It's just that within that pot, ADOS is at the bottom. So I think when it comes to our own people, we're going to have to spend the next year showing them that they voted for someone who's going to keep them at the bottom of the pot. I think in his 100-day plan, it's there's a lot of foreign policies in it because that's what they think is necessary.
And I don't think there's nothing more. And this is my matter of fact, I want to ask that question. Because to me, there is no America without, slavery. There is no America without the oppression of enslaved peoples here. I I would like for somebody to help me understand how fixing that issue isn't the biggest issue in America. I feel like fixing that is bigger than foreign policy. It's bigger than the defense budget. It's bigger than all of it. Because if you don't fix that, you're gonna need a defense budget for America, essentially. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think we have to view it that way. I think we have to view it as, no, there's nothing more important than this. Nothing. Like, this is day one. Day one, we're gonna sign reparations into the agenda because there will be nothing to defend without the oppression of Black people. There will be no here to come to. So this is more important, in my opinion. But you know what? How do y'all feel about that?
Well, let me just share this and then we'll continue. So here, this is an AP News article about some early shifts on immigration expected under Biden. And I'm going to read the part about a change of tone. Restricting immigration was a signature issue for Trump, who infamously called Mexicans rapists as he pledged to build a border wall in launching his campaign. His administration banned travelers from some predominantly Muslim countries as one of its first acts, took many steps to limit legal immigration, and cut the number of refugees allowed in the country by 80%. Biden has said immigration is central to who we are as a nation, noting that most Americans can trace their ancestry to immigrants, but it isn't a core issue. It's not even mentioned on his transition website's top priorities, those being COVID-19, economic recovery, racial justice, and climate change. Biden named Cecilia Muniz, President Barack Obama's top immigration advisor, to his transition team, which some interpreted as signaling a more moderate tact. So any thoughts on what I just read?
The first thing that comes to mind, oh, go ahead, Ms. Al.
Speaking about that economic, he said his economic recovery plan, but the numbers for ADOS is so dismal. For example, in California, we are 54% of the homeless, but Blacks only 5.8% of the population. How is ADOS gonna recover when we've been so, I guess what I'm saying, with COVID and we're at the bottom of the barrel? What economic recovery plan can they apply to ADOS America and make an impact? We're so far gone, especially with COVID. I guess what I think, as Dr. Doherty and Mullen emphasized, they're grabbing the numbers. They even alluded to, we may not recover economically because of COVID. And we need to keep that in the forefront of our mind. What type of economic recovery can be developed for anybody that includes Black America, and we're gonna recover it. And it's no guarantee. That's just my comment.
And I also think, like, when we look at the recovery, and I guess it's just kind of the way my mind works, right? So in order to push recovery for ADOS America, you have to consider ADOS America a priority. And I don't believe that we're even a priority at this point. And I feel like that's based on everything that he's saying. Like, I can't, I understand that we haven't all the way been moved from the benign neglect era, where it's just, we just not gonna talk about that. We're not gonna talk about it. And I think over a time period of that being an essence of what goes on in a political space, when you have these riots and you have this destruction, of course they scapegoat. Well, look at them. That's why they like that, because they burn and this and that. And that's why I think we're so important, because we speak to, no, they're burning up things because we've been weaponless from day one. And all of this idea that America has of Black people is totally the opposite of where we really are. So I think we have to make our community important. And I've been thinking personally a couple ways in which we could do it, but I think we have to make it American, because I feel like some of the more radical things that I've said personally, and this is my honest truth, I don't feel that there's anybody more American than the descendants of American slavery. We've been here the longest. We fought in every war. We've sacrificed way more than everybody for a way longer period of time. So we have to push, no, I'm more American than anybody here. And either you're going to do right by me, and this again, where I kind of veer, I'm veering again. I'm going to burn this, so I'm going to burn it down. I'm going to burn all of this down. And I think we have to, we have to make ourselves important. Like when we speak about, and I don't know if y'all notice this in the conversations that y'all have outside of the ADOS group, but when people talk about foreign policy and people talk about DACA and people talk about the defense budget, they don't speak about those things in the same context that they speak about Black people and doing right by us. It's like, oh, well, we'll talk about that later. Right now, we're talking about something serious. We got to kick that door out. Like, no, ain't nothing more serious than this, because you're not Democratic, you're not Republican, you're not none of that stuff. You are worse than the people you saying you going over there trying to fight and defend. How can we talk about our democracy? How can we put our democracy on a pedestal? It's not a true democracy. We still have voter suppression. We're still oppressing people. We still have, Loudoun County, Alabama, where people got hookworms in their feet. Like, this happens to us daily. And I think until we make reparations for descendants of American slavery as important as the United States defense budget, until we can have those conversations in the same spaces, and I think that we are, point of reference being reparations was mentioned at the national debates. So I think we closer than what we think we are. We have to make it a one-to-one, because I feel like when it comes to fighting for us, like right now, if any of us were to go to talk to our council members or our governors of Kansas or Missouri, and we say, yo, reparations for Black people, what you got? We getting dismissed. I don't think we're going to get that respect till we show up in the town hall 100 deep and we like, look, we ain't talking about nothing but this, and we're going to be here all day. Because either we're going to get this right, or I'm going to show up to everything you have, and I'm just going to make it hard for you. And we gotta be on it like that. I feel like intellectually, like show up, because like I really just don't think nobody's smarter than us. But that's my opinion. We with this. We read, we research, we know that. For sure.
I'm going to share my screen again to show this article about COVID rates in Kansas City. Okay. All right, so here we can see that right now in Missouri, positivity rates for the previous 7 days of testing rose to 40.8% as of today, November 12th. That's higher than it's ever been, including the peak 13.6% during the spring stay-at-home orders. So, and then I'll click here. So that's where we are right now with COVID in Missouri. You know, people, the state, the country is pushing for economic recovery in a time when positivity rates of COVID in Missouri are 40%. How do we recover from that as black ADOS? You know, if their officials, health officials are talking about we need another shutdown. What will Black Americans do if our job if the jobs that we just got back are taken away again
We
twice in
fail.
1 year? What are we gonna do?
We fail. We're gonna fail, and it's gonna be monumental. Uh, I think first and foremost, we have to again make ADOS a thing. Like we need to be as solidified as other groups of people, immigrants, white people, Spanish, whatever. Um, because without that, I don't think we can make a case to fight for our resources. Because if they just look at us like, oh well, everybody has COVID. I think it's the same thing that we do with ADOS. When America's sick, you know, when America gets sick, we get the flu. You know what I'm saying? When coronavirus hits, we in the beginning, I know we were 70% all coronavirus deaths due to
Mhm.
due to pre-existing conditions. And so why do we have pre-existing conditions? And that pretty much goes right back to slavery. And then so I think coronavirus, we connect coronavirus and our issues with job loss, wealth loss, et cetera, et cetera. We connect that to everything else. Because to us, everything happens worse to us. And from how I understood democracy, you know when you're trying to fix a poverty issue, you have to start with the least of these. We are the least of the least of these. So we have to start from that point and go forward. But I feel like until we can identify as a group, I don't know that we can differentiate because our issues are gonna be like everybody else's. Corona, I don't have a job, I don't have this, I don't have that. I think the difference is we don't have any wealth to fall back on. We don't have, our great grandparents' money to spend when we hit hard times. Because like for most of us, I know for me, I'm all I got. I can't call my mama daddy, grandma, uncle, none of that. If I ain't got it, I ain't gonna have it. And so I feel like until we, solidify us as a group, and then we're able to make a case on our claims, because I think all the data is there. We just got to go in that direction.
I agree. I feel like we'll end up going the route of some of the bars. I mean, it's funny, when I was looking at, and we actually talked about this on the podcast too. But like when we talk about, or we were talking about what Lucas had to say. While Parsons on one side is talking about what was it yeah, that's right. They put in place that nobody that's been in direct contact with somebody with COVID necessarily may have to quarantine. um, while at the same time the numbers are rising like crazy. And Lucas said, or it seemed like Lucas's main concern was with the bars. And I think in this kind of scenario, we would be considered like the bars, because what Lucas was saying was that he doesn't know if the bars can take another round of shutdowns and lockdowns, as they are. Restaurants may be able to survive because, of course, they can do contactless delivery and and try to implement some other sort of programs. Whereas a bar, you're dealing with social gatherings and alcohol, both of which are you know, and neither of which can travel outside of the facility that you have. So it's like, so for ADOS or for Black people, another round of, you know, COVID shutdown could ultimately lead to a lot of us ending up or facing the same fate as some of these bars.
Go ahead, Ms. Al.
I have 2 points to make on that. Missouri's COVID response. It came out that Governor Parsons has $1 billion in COVID relief that the federal government says he has 2 months to spend. And secondly, you know, rural farmers are receiving aid. But again, the urban community has been, I guess, right now they're saying our hospitals are at 75% occupancy. And someone posted today, the doctors, the coalition here in St. Louis, the doctors came together and they mentioned that if they don't set a plan, we may not recover. It's getting pretty dismal. I think we had over 5,000 new cases yesterday. It's pretty bad, but as far as economically, we can't recover if people are dying. You know, we can't have it both ways. In order to get over this pandemic, Fauci said that we needed to shut down months ago, totally shut down, you know, but we refused to. They did initiate restrictions, but again, we had an administration that accepted information from scientists as being an opinion. So I think our recovery response from the beginning was half-baked. And as far as economically, if people are starting dying and passing this disease, we're not going to recover anyway because we're losing our workforce. And most of the people that's dying are the breadwinners. Those are just 2 points. I think we should consider the health of the nation opposed to economic recovery first.
And also to add on to what Al is saying, you know, because this comes from I guess not a similar conversation, but I'll draw the comparison here. When we look at all of the people that we're losing, you know, we have to, matter of fact, I'll share my screen. We have to think about who we're losing in the workforce. Like she said, we're losing a lot of our breadwinners. So what sparked up in my mind is, you know, think about the article that came out not too long ago that talks about Black wealth going to be zero in 2053. So we know the majority of our wealth holders are our older generation. So if they're all dying, that money is being transferred. Now, why is that important? Think about this on the white aspect of things. Baby boomers also hold the largest wealth in the white community. So with all of older white people dying, they're then transferring that wealth down to their kids. So now the wealth transfer is happening, I'm sure, at ridiculous rates. So now we have a big pot of wealth that's going essentially to white America. Black America is not receiving the same amounts. So therefore, I'm thinking once we come out of COVID, prices of everything is going to be going up because that money will be changed. Now the economy is doing really bad, but we all know in a bad economy, we're on the bottom. So, and to compare that, once we, you know, if we could even foresee us getting out of this COVID case, think about our workforce. Who are the majority of people in prisons? They look like me and Chris. You know, we're prime age working Black Americans. And the majority of people in our age group are in prison. So we really, how do we rebound? Because a majority of our working force is in jail. Now we know Black women are the highest group of educated women in America. But again, I think just like when we were looking at the comparison to the dollar in America, like, so, you know, white men, of course, understand it. They make $1 for a dollar. White women, I think, are 60, I don't know, 68 cents, something like that. So in their whole household is 168. And you look at us, you know, Black men are at 67%, Black men are at 67 cents, Black women are at 64%. 64 cents. So that's like $1.12 as compared to $1.70. But that doesn't include the prison population, because we understand that we don't include the prison population in other groups of people because they're in prison at less than 1%, as opposed to black men are in prison at 10%, which brings that 63 cents, I think, down to like 55 or something. So our working force isn't there. So us rebounding from COVID, it just looks bleak as time goes on. We're gonna need big government. We're gonna need that reparations, or else we just gonna all be homeless. I mean, that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think we also need to focus on it's going to happen sooner rather than later. You know, I know some of us are looking at what's going to happen if our city, I think health officials were saying that if something doesn't change, if officials don't implement mandated mask legislation or mandates within the next 2 weeks, that we're projected that hospitals are already experiencing a lack of resources. And if something doesn't happen in the next 2 weeks, that we're going to have to experience another shutdown. So we're basically looking at the end of this month. If we don't have an intervention now, today, a lot of us are looking at probably not even making it past the end of the year without having to experience another shutdown, without having to experience job loss again. And this time it's without a stimulus on the way. In the chat, I put a couple of tweets from Mayor Cruzen in St. Louis, where the first one where she's already stepping up and prohibiting large gatherings, which is great. It's great for the people. It's awful for the business owners, but something has to be done, you know? And then the second one is where St. Louis is authorizing $7.4 million from federal aid to help people with rental and mortgage assistance. Go ahead, Miss Al.
Yeah, I did want to comment about that. I live in the Loft District downtown in St. Louis, and I'm right across the street where I'm a block from Busch Stadium. And it's a business that during quarantine, if the mayor hadn't stepped up, they were out there partying. Like it wasn't a quarantine, no mask. You wouldn't believe it. You went outside, open, just.
I believe it because they're doing that here. They're about to do it today with that Trump rally.
And with me, believe it or not to dwell on, don't want any sympathy. I take chemo. And for me to be around someone without a mask, I have to wear a mask. I have to protect myself, but it's a lot of people just carried on like it's not a pandemic, and it's terrifying. It's terrifying, and they'll even encourage you that it's not a big deal, but we know otherwise. But it's pretty scary here, especially living where I'm living. Just for me to go out, I've been basically isolated since March. So it's like, oh, and something else for Leighton, that's something else that happens to your wealth. If you get a serious critical disease or something, that'll eat your wealth up too. the treatments and stuff. That's another thing that happens to Black wealth. You know what I mean? Because a lot of baby boomers, find themselves ill or whatever, and they have to spend a lot of money for treatments, stuff like that. There's a lot of ways that they manipulate us out of money. So in staying alive, you'll pay anything, for, to get healthy. That's just the comment I'm making.
And
Can I put in a side note there that I think some of those things that we're talking about that we would be able to take care of with reparations, we might not necessarily, we shouldn't necessarily have to feed our reparations into those things, like things that we were systemically shut out of, like home ownership and wealth, like decent medical coverage. I think those things should be taken care of in reparations policies. I know this is going way off topic, but it's kind of like a side note. I just think we should, like they push Medicaid or Medicare for all, we should have health insurance for all ADOS.
And I think that's a part, which I have to go back and double check, but I think about more so like the access. We need access to good medical coverage. And I know that a big part of having access to medical coverage is being able to afford it. You know what I'm saying? And so because what Al's talking about is just an insurance issue. I mean, Black people don't like going to the doctor like that anyway, for reasons I wouldn't mind going into. But to be able to have the money to provide the care. But I think that healthcare also goes along with the causes that cause the health issues. Some of those is based in our culture because we've been poor for so long. We eat collard greens and pork chops and black-eyed peas, and we eat that kind of stuff every day. We supposed to eat that every day. But a lot of times that's all we could afford. So now if we have more, if we have more wealth, we're in a different wealth position. Now we're able to, still eat those things, because I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I ain't never giving away collard greens and hot water cornbread. That's gonna be with me forever. Seasons with some good back fat if I get to choose. But with that being said, when you're able to eat, you're not in a food desert. You have access to good produce. You're able to eat better. You're able to go to those doctors, those annual checkups if you have health insurance. And they're not asking you for $500 for a checkup. You take care of all your, your premature stuff, and then it never gets that big. But I very much feel like, we have older ADOS Americans that have these pre-existing conditions, high cholesterol. A lot of that stuff is, stress. Like, you've been working around white people your whole life, on the edge of losing your job every day. Everywhere you go is like that.
That's the cost of being ADOS.
And going to Brian, we talking about pain and suffering. That's what I'm talking about. We need to put a price on the stress that we incurred living in this for 400 years. That's that arbitrary number that should be way up there. But I agree. It's multiple ways, y'all. And even with what we're doing, it's no one size fits all. I don't think, even if we get reparations, I'm pretty sure that's not going to solve 100% of our issues. But I do think it'll solve like 87. You know what I'm saying? So it'll still be more that needs to be done. But we just have to, we got to stay vigilant, like we always talk about.
All right, guys, and ladies and gentlemen, it is now 11:37. So we can do a hard stop here. And I want to say that before we wrap it up, if anyone else has any comments they want to add in, please do so now.
I have a comment. Maybe we can talk about this next time, but it's about a Missouri judge orders revamping of Missouri's unconstitutional parole system. Maybe we can speak about that. It came out today in the Post. Maybe we can speak about that next time. I thought it was interesting. That's all.
Yeah, sure. If you can, either post it on your Twitter account or leave it in the chat so that way we'll have a chance to like read over the article.
I wanted to mention one of the videos that Tom put out this week. He was discussing, post-election, of course we looked at the exit polls, but he also took he spoke kind of briefly on it, but he was talking about Biden's transition team and all of the people that he essentially put into his cabinet. And
Very conservative.
And so that's my push to the Democrats to say, oh, well, we could have got reparations better through Joe than Trump. And like my argument is, it's the same people. Like he got the same people on his team as Trump had. Like, how do you defend it? And I think his Secretary of State, maybe, I forget the guy's title. His name is Klain. He's like Klain or something like that. And
Robert Klain?
Yeah.
Robert Klain or Klain or whatever.
Yeah. So I think he was very instrumental in, I think it was the 94 crime bill and not the 26. But why you if we're asking, if you just apologize for the 94 crime bill and you said that it didn't work out, what the hell is you putting this dude at the front of your transition team? That is a conversation that I would like to have with Democrat supporters. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, okay, well, y'all said he's going for this, but your boy is fired, and that's who we rocking with. But, that's a discussion for a later date.
Well, we'll start off with those next week. All right. Well, we are at the end of our discussions for today. I really appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you are watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. And as always, we will see you next Saturday. Bye.
Bye all.
Y'all be safe.
Yeah.